they're asleep in the next room, safe, breathing, 10 feet away, and you miss them. Or they're at a sleepover, their first day of school, a weekend at their grandparents', and something in your chest goes tight for no reason you can name. You wanted the break. You needed the quiet. And the moment you got it, you started counting the hours until they came back. Most people assume the answer is obvious. You love them. Of course you miss them. But that's not quite right. And the real answer is far stranger than you'd expect, because that ache isn't just a feeling. It's a physical event happening inside your brain right now, whether you want it to or not. For most of human history, we just called it love and left it there. We had no idea what was actually happening underneath. And what's happening underneath is not what you think. The first part of the answer is that you are, in a very real sense, in withdrawal. In the 1970s, neuroscientists discovered that the brain makes its own opioids, chemicals nearly identical to the ones in morphine and heroin, produced naturally inside your own head. A researcher named Jaak Panksepp had a strange idea about what they were for. He proposed that love itself, the bond between a parent and a child, runs on this exact system, that attachment is, in his words, an opioid-mediated addictive process. To test it, he gave separation distress to young animals taken from their mothers, and they cried. They searched. Then he gave them a low dose of opiates, and the distress stopped. The drug filled the same space the mother would have filled. Here's what that means for you. When your child is near, your brain releases its own opioids, a quiet, constant, low-level high you don't even notice because it's just called being with your kid. And when they leave, those levels drop. And your brain does exactly what any brain does when a substance it depends on is suddenly gone. It craves. You are not being needy. You are not being dramatic. You are detoxing from a person. But that's only half the story. And honestly, what comes next is harder to sit with, because the ache you feel when you miss them isn't just emotional. Your brain is processing it as actual physical pain. In 2003, a psychologist named Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA put people in a brain scanner and had them experience social rejection. She expected to see emotional circuits light up. Instead, she saw something else. She saw the anterior cingulate cortex, the exact region that registers the sting of a burn, the throb of a broken bone, the raw signal your body sends when something is physically wrong. Social pain and physical pain share the same wiring. Your brain never built a separate system for heartbreak. It just reused the one it already had for injury. So when people say they miss someone so much it hurts, they aren't reaching for a metaphor. They're describing a measurement. The absence of your child registers in your brain as a kind of wound. But there's another layer to this, and it might be the strangest part of all. Because when you became a parent, your brain didn't just change how it feels, it changed its shape. For decades, scientists assumed the adult brain was basically fixed. Then they started scanning the brains of new parents, and what they found was staggering. In a landmark study, and again in a detailed 2024 follow-up, researchers tracked the maternal brain across pregnancy and after birth, and of roughly 400 brain regions they examined, 97% had changed. Gray matter physically reorganized. Whole regions remodeled. And it wasn't temporary. When researchers came back years later, the changes were still there. In one study, they could look at a brain scan and tell whether a woman had ever been pregnant or not with around 92% accuracy, 6 years after the fact. Maybe for life. Sit with what that means. The brain that holds your child is not the brain you had before them. It was taken apart and rebuilt around them. You could not go back to who you were before, even if you wanted to. That person doesn't exist anymore. Which raises an uncomfortable question. When you miss them, What are you actually missing? Them? Or the version of yourself that only exists when they're near? And here's where it gets stranger still. Because everyone assumes this is a mother thing. Pregnancy, hormones, something only a body that carried a child could feel. It isn't. In May 2026, researchers at University Hospital Aachen published the most detailed scans of new fathers' brains ever taken. 6 scans each, starting 1 week after birth, and the father's brains were rewiring too, fastest in the first 6 weeks. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, wired itself tighter into the regions for memory and emotion, and the fathers with the strongest connections there reported the strongest bond to their babies. But the most important finding came from an earlier study. The more hours a parent spent in direct hands-on care, the more their brain changed. The bond was not handed to them. It was built by showing up, which means the ache you feel was earned. Every diaper, every 3 a.m., every ordinary, exhausting, forgettable day wired them a little deeper into you. You didn't just love them. You rebuilt your brain around them, one boring day at a time. There's one more piece, and explains something you've probably felt but never questioned. Your brain didn't just change its chemistry and its shape. It retuned your senses. There's a hormone you've heard of, oxytocin. Most people think of it as the warm, cuddly bonding chemical, but its real job is stranger than that. At New York University, researchers studied what happens in a mother's brain when she hears her infant cry. Oxytocin physically retuned her neurons so that the cry became impossible to ignore. As impossible to ignore as your own name spoken across a crowded room. That's why you wake up at the smallest sound, why you swear you hear them when they aren't even home, why a stranger's child crying in a store makes your head snap around. Your brain flagged your child as the single most important signal in your entire world, and it never unflags them. Not when they grow up, not when they move out, not ever. So here's what's actually happening when you miss your kids. Your brain runs the bond on its own, opioids, and their absence is withdrawal. It processes that absence in the same place it processes a broken bone. It tore itself down and rebuilt its structure around them, permanently, and it tuned your senses to never stop listening for them. It wasn't one thing, it was everything all at once. And none of it is a flaw. It's the most successful piece of survival code ever written. A parent who didn't feel this, who could walk away and feel nothing, would not go back for a child too helpless to survive on its own. So evolution made the bond hurt. It made absence feel like withdrawal, like injury, like a piece of you missing. Because the pain is what keeps the helpless alive. You didn't just make a child. The child remade you. Rewired your chemistry, reshaped your brain, retuned every sense you have. So the next time they're gone, even for a night, even asleep in the next room, and you feel that pull you can't explain, understand what it actually is. It isn't weakness. It isn't you being needy. It's the proof. They are not just someone you love. They are now part of how your brain is built. And missing them is what it feels like to be missing a piece of yourself.